The topic of today is Free Nnamdi Kanu and Simon Ekpa, or close Nigerian embassies in Ghana, Kenya, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Namibia, and the rest of them, not to mention in this very video. This is because Nigerian government has, in its own method, adopted selective prosecution and political bias, especially in the Nigerian criminal justice system. Nigeria in itself has over 250 ethnic groups that congregated itself within the three regions of Nigeria: the north, the southwest, and the southeast. Indeed, the unity of Nigeria has been compromised since 1966. Till date, there is no more unity in Nigeria. Instead, the war provided the allies of Britain, that is the North, the Yorubas, and those who compromised within the southeastern region. The suppression of the Biafran War provided a palatable bias system that led to political, social, and economic domination by the allies of Britain, the North, and the Southwest, whose subjects indeed fought against the Igbos, whom they saw that dominated the southeastern region of Nigeria. This oppressive system promoted biasness and gangsters, including mafia grouping against the Igbos in federal government system of Nigeria. The cumulative effect of this system made it possible for reawakening and reinforcement of agitation for the restating of the defunct Biafran nation through the United Nations principles of self-determination. Although Biafran agitators are not the only group agitating for separate nation within the Nigerian entity, there are other ones like the Yoruba nation, Oduduwa nation, Arewa nation, Niger Delta region nation, and all whatnot. The one that they do not want to hear is the Biafran nation. The Nigerian authorities are mistaking the type Ojukwu fought, which was aggravated by the killings and the many of Igbos in the north and in Lagos, and eventually the bombardment of Biafran nation through the supervision of Britain between 1967 to 1970. The modern-day agitators are following the dynamic principles of self-determination as entrenched in the United Nations Charter. In this principle of self-determination, which refers to a people's right to form its own political entity and internal self-determination to the United Nations, this self-determination is a cardinal principle in modern international law, binding on all the United Nations members, with the United Nations as the sole authority to interpret this very charter. This concept was what brought about the rise of nationalism in the 19th century. Indeed, America as a state used the commitment of self-determination to free themselves from the United Kingdom. That was why they have their independence in 1776. In Russia, Vladimir Lenin, a Russian revolutionary leader and a politician, he used the principle of national self-determination as a weapon against the Russian Empire. It was after this successful revolution that the Leningrad Party supported the right of all nations, including colonies, to self-determination. While Russian government helped other subjugated countries in Africa, for instance, to be free from the subjugation, because the party in 1918 Constitution, the Soviet Union, acknowledged the right of secession for its constituent republics, and that is why most countries within them have their own independence. Indeed, the aim of the self-determination is to end colonization and colonialism, which most African countries took as an advantage including the Biafran agitators today. Before Media goes into the main issue of differentiating on how the colonialists and neo-colonialists punish self-determination agitators or activists who want to liberate their people from the subjugation operations and some government subjective actions, like determining how they will play their politics, what they will do, how they will be punished if they are not voted for by your ethnic group, including depriving some ethnic groups from voting within their own territory without the effect on those who are seen as alien in their territory. For instance, this has been happening to Igbos in Lagos, in the north, with today's attrition of Igbo Must Go campaign, driving Igbos to the sea if they don't vote to a particular candidate. Selective prosecution against a particular ethnic group by the security agencies involved in the criminal justice. In this system, Igbo ethnic group and political associations are being disproportionately targeted, which is also not healthy for the unity of Nigerian state, which they are enforcing the Biafran agitators to bind with them. There have been bias, mistrust, and in many communities in the southeast of Nigeria being targeted by law enforcement agencies. They are alienated from the affairs and hems of Nigeria. Although the Biafran agitators believe they are at the receiving ends of these policies that deprive them from being part and parcel of the system. This led to the agitation of various nationalists, various self-determination activists, human rights groups that raised up their voices in the 1950s and the 60s against British operations in African countries, including Nigeria itself, because the indigenous people were suppressed, discriminated, and even deprived of the essential amenities from the colonial government. These were the reasons people like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, Nelson Mandela, and Walter Sisulu of South Africa, Robert Mugabe, and Joshua Nkomo of Old Rhodesia, today Zimbabwe. Then people like Sam Nujoma and Ademba Hama of Namibia. All these reawakened the spirit of self-determination in these very gentlemen in the 1950s and the 60s, even 70s till the year 2000. These discriminations, deprivations, and exclusions, both politically, economically, socially, even displacements of the indigenous people out of their homes and the land, aggravated the spirit of these very leaders. They were subjected to torture, mistreatment, to force them to abandon the agitation. But they never give up. None of these groups that began this very journey gave up until the independence of their nations and their people set free. They never gave up, but continued their campaign. However, they became targets of the government of their various nations. The colonial leaders manufacture allegations from time to time against the activists to stop them from acting on behalf of the people. Like what is happening today in Biafra land, the colonial administrative officers and the government try to diffuse and counter the activities of the agitators by employing the services of local chiefs, members of the communities, and also the church. They ally with some priests to diffuse the effect of those who are agitating. However, when they could not curtail their activities, they began to make allegations against them using the law enforcement agencies of government to track and arrest them. Historically, from the colonial administrators to the present-day African leaders, the only reputable allegations against any self-determination activist always include terrorism, treasonable felony, violence, stockpiling of ammunition, and disrespect to the government authority. Having provided this preliminary knowledge of what happens from the British colonial era to the present day of President Ahmed Tinubu, who represents the new colonialist, and his master Muhammadu Buhari, it is pertinent to note that he himself, as the president of the present-day Nigeria, who is trying both Mazi Nnamdi Kanu and Samuel Ekpa, has his own economic interest that he wants to colonize and protect in Biafra land, and that is why most of them do not want Biafra to exist. Now let us summarize what happened to these very activists and their host authorities. First, let us look at Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. We are not going to repeat the history, but we want to bring out the charges the authorities leveled on him because he was fighting for the independence of Ghana. Because of his activities, charge him of terrorism and treason. Then the Jomo Kenyatta. Jomo Kenyatta was the father of which during his regime as the president of Kenya, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu was abducted. He knew about it, there is no doubt, because within that very period, he became more friendlier with Muhammadu Buhari, was coming to Nigeria to deliver lectures. Buhari was visiting him. All these are the elements of openness to show that there was a collaboration. Despite they might say they never knew about it, they don't have anything to do about it. Yes, but authoritatively, they knew everything that took place. Well, that is not the main issue now. The main issue is what happened to his father as an activist. His father was from the region where they have the Mau Mau warriors that battled the British soldiers and also the indigenes that were supporting them in those days. I want to use this opportunity to make it clear that during this struggle, some indigenes of those who were activists were against them. They were sabotaging their efforts in every way to cripple them. The authority of the day were using these people against the activists as well as they are doing today in Biafra land, in Igbo land, in Nigeria. It has always been so. Read history of the activists and it will baffle you that the people you are fighting for are going towards the other side and sabotaging your effort. So Jomo Kenyatta in his days has his own slot. Let us continue. This time let us go to Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu. They were all South African activists. They never had it easy. They were bullied. They were chased out of their places. They were hiding themselves because the authorities were out, stopped them from the activities which was geared towards freeing their people from the dominations and the racial discrimination and the deprivation of every other amenities from the government of the day. Eventually, they were also charged with treason, violence, and terrorism. And the president then was called P.W. Botha, Peter Williams Botha, backed by the British government before they were persuaded by other nations to break the support they were giving to these very regimes. in terms of local sabotaging, that is, people from the same ethnic group or black groups from other regions. They never had it easy as well. They were also sabotaged. No one is free of this. The only consolation the activists had was to be focused and steadfast in all their activities and endurance above all. Then we go back to Southern Rhodesia, otherwise known as Zimbabwe today, under the leadership of Ian Smith. Ian Smith was a very wicked ruler, and also, like his counterpart in South Africa, they were all minority leaders with discriminative tendencies against the indigenous people. Unfortunately, they face a hard and hardened agitators who in every way insisted the change must come in their lifetime. They were punished, they were chased out of the nation, allegations made against them. And what were the allegations? They were sedition, high treason, and stockpiling weapons. These were the allegations leveled against them. As usual, where there are bad things, Britain must be there. Britain were their backers. So, but despite all this, they were able to succeed. And today, they have the result of their effort. Zimbabwe is now a free state and governed by one man, one vote, as it's supposed to be. In the series of this, we have also Namibia. This was a colony of Germany, and after the Second World War, as everyone is aware, Germany was defeated by the Allies. It lost its territories in Africa. Then Namibia was handed over to the administration of racist South African regime, for which Pieter Botha administered until they were able to get their independence in 1990. It never came by the platter of gold. It was a battle, just like every other self-determination group. They had two non-activists, Sam Nujoma and Herman Adimma Toivo. These two men were the leading figures, and they fought for the independence of Namibia. However, they were charged under Terrorism Act as subverting and fighting against the government of the day to have their own independence. These are the offshoots of British legacies of torturing those who are fighting for their own independence. But unfortunately, they were the people who signed, after the Second World War, Churchill, the British Prime Minister then, with Roosevelt and others, signed that you are free to have your own independence. Perhaps then they had the motive of free independence for those in the Eastern Europe that were ruled by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So eventually the black Africans tapped through that and fought for their own independence. So Britain never wanted any African country to have independence. That is why you have many rigorous years of fighting for independence in Africa. Let us continue and summarize what Herman Adimba stated when he came out from the subjugation of the Pieter Botha government of South Africa. Let us read it. I quote, "We are Namibians and not South Africans. We do not now and will not in the future recognize your right to govern us, to make laws for us in which we had no say, to treat our country as if it were your property and as if you were our masters. We have always regarded South Africa as intruder in our country." Unquote. This was coming from Adimba Herman in 1978. And this was considered as political activity that earned him the charge under Terrorism Act. Then back to Nigeria and Biafra. Today, Nigeria has produced similar leaders like Peter Botha and Ian Smith of Southern Rhodesia in the name of Muhammad Buhari from northern part of Nigeria and Ahmed Tinubu of southwestern Nigeria of Yoruba ethnic extraction. They have formed ally with their masters to block the independence of Biafran nation. There is no doubt that legitimization of the principle of national self-determination has led to increased number of conflicts within the states. But that does not mean that the determination of secession from the old state should cease. It is expected that there will be conflict as directed and stated in the explanations of international law. The effect of self-secession or determination and the old state. There are two things that always happen. There may be conflict and also there may be boundary adjustment. But in the Nigerian context today, it is bedeviled with conflict of suppression, which is not far-fetched. It is the same in the old regions of those who pursued their independence from the time of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah till the time of Nelson Mandela, Southern Sudan, and Eritrea. All these are part of the separative movement, which the only nation on earth that had made it simple was only the Czech Republic and Slovakia, which separated peacefully and understandably and remain the best neighbors today. Again, in the midst of the secession, there are always conflict of leadership within the groups and sometimes with other groups. We see what is happening between the IPOB, within the IPOB, and inside the IPOB, especially those who allow themselves to be used by the Nigerian government. It is not new. It has always been the same. Even in the time of Jesus, some people will give themselves in for use. That is normal in life. So you must have always some Judases within any group. It's not new. The only thing is to know how to overcome these lapses. Finally, we look at the government of Nigerian allegations. Nigeria is making allegations and has presented its allegations before the court of laws. Then, that does not mean the end of the struggle. People should look beyond that, given in this program. It is what we give people confidence, what we give people the insight of what happens. From the time Mazi Nnamdi Kanu was traced and abducted to the time Mazi Simon Njoke Ekpa was also arrested, all are part of the struggle and experiences they must have, just like those mentioned earlier. They've had them, they have had their experiences, and they were able to succeed. The government of Muhammad Buhari and Tinubu are aware. They are aware indeed that these young men will succeed if they persist and continue the struggle. There's no doubt they have had the history, they know it, they are using their own power to suppress them just like the other group did under the supervision of Britain. This is normal for those who are blacks and Africans. Britain will not give you a chance where they have their interest. But they forget one thing. They don't use their tongues to count their teeth, including the African leaders themselves. You have heard what happened to Mandela, you have heard what happened to Jomo Kenyatta, you have heard what happened to Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, you have heard what happened to Robert Mugabe, Joshua Nkomo, Sam Nujoma, to mention but a few. this should be a guiding principle to African leaders, but they don't listen. They listen more to the foreign advisors than the local. The foreign advisors cannot help you when things go wrong. That is the main thing. But thank goodness that most activists tender peace for justice at the end, despite all the troubles they encounter in the hand of the wicked leaders. With this, we come to the end of this very program. So our aim and our objective is that if the government of Muhammad Tinubu and his cronies want to continue charging Nnamdi Kanu with terrorism, with all these acts that has been established by British system in Africa, that is being applied to Nnamdi Kanu and Simon Ekpa. Therefore, they have no justification. They have no right to place their embassies in the soils of those Britain advised their representatives to hand over these activities. They overcame it and came out successfully. Then you bring your embassy into that very place. If you think they are not doing what they're supposed to do, and that they did what they learned from all these people mentioned, you don't have to place your embassies. Your representatives are not supposed to be there. If you do it, you yourself is a terrorist inside a terrorist country, because you declared these leaders terrorists when they were alive. So you don't have no justification to place your representatives into these countries. That is the justification, and that is what's supposed to be. If they were bad and you used the template they were used to punish their own leaders, then those countries, on the other hand, should not allow them to come into their country and establish embassy. Finally, we will look at the reactions of international communities. Sometimes we think that the international community will always intervene in any issue, especially in Black African continent. They don't react. However, when they react, it is not even reaction. Some will react based on their interest and what will benefit them. That is the only way the reaction comes into display. In African countries, there is a different understanding of what they can do unless you fight and kill yourselves to the point that they will say enough is enough. Unlike the Eastern Europe, however, the United Nations is criticized of not doing enough over their failures to monitor the new demands, despite being aware that the right to self-determination of people still remains under the control of colonial domination and control. At this very point, we will call it a day and ask the government of Ahmed Tinubu to consider what to do. You are not of white background, just to say a list. You have to act and act wisely. With this, we come to the end of this very particular program. Until we come to you once again, do not fail to subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Remain blessed.